We've got some
Hey, I'm Luis.
And I'm Luis.
And you're listening to the Content is Profit podcast.
We spent the last 4 years learning the strategies and techniques from some of the top marketers in the world on how to create content that turns into profit. And today, we're bringing them to you so you can take action immediately and start creating real content momentum.
If you'd like to learn more about how to turn your content into profit, go to contentisprofit.com. Oh, yeah. And we're back for another episode of the Content is Profit podcast, this time with a local entrepreneur. We have been introduced to him many times, which speaks highly of him and his relationships.
That is right. His mission is to encourage, educate, and empower others. Actually, he is so committed that he just published the self-help book, 6 Practical Ways to Never Stop Growing. That's not an easy feat. Let me tell you, writing a book, I can't even imagine.
Not only that, he has been pretty successful himself. He is the host of the Business and Leadership podcast. He's a Forbes Under 30 TEDx speaker and owns the #1 meal prep company in the 904, aka Jacksonville, for 4 years in a row.
That's right. That is impressive. Please welcome local entrepreneur hero, author of the self-help book, and someone you don't want to mess up with because he works out a lot, Jared Graybeal. Welcome,
Wow.
Jared.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I mean, let me ask you something. Did they introduce you like this on your CrossFit competition last week?
No, I don't. I'm pretty upset about it now.
I know you're going to have to send the recording and be like, hire these guys.
Yeah, just play this, hire these guys.
Did we just find our new niche?
Maybe.
CrossFit intros in the events.
Intros in the events. Oh, sweet.
Maybe.
Slash
Who
podcast
knows?
announcers. Dude, Jared, thank you so much for coming into the show. We are so excited to have you here. Local talent. It's not often that we bring people from our own town. We're super proud to have you here for everything that you have achieved. So I just want to say thank you, man.
Yeah,
Glad to be here. Thank you.
Dude, Jared, of course, main topic of conversation today is going to be the self-help book. But I'm curious, and I'm sure people that are listening are curious as well, on how do you get to this, right? Because I'm sure you didn't wake up one morning and were like, I'm going to write the self-help book, and you put all this wisdom in here. I'm sure you went through a lifetime of lessons. And I would love to know, what is your backstory? What have been some of those challenges that taught you what you put in this book?
Yeah, great question. I mean, you're right. Writing a book, I think, is somewhat of a especially writing a self-help book is somewhat of a lifelong journey. But I'll sort of wrap up the long form story to make it as short as possible. When I was a kid, I read a quote by Benjamin Franklin, and I'll just paraphrase it. And he basically said, if you want to be someone worth remembering, either do things worth writing about or write things worth reading. And, I don't picture myself being the next like Red Bull athlete jumping out of space or anything. So I figured I should probably write a book at some point. So since I was a kid, that's always been an ambition. However, I was never a very competent or talented writer. Throughout English classes, literature classes, I was always a C- kind of kid, very mediocre. I liked math and I liked creativity and arts and things like that. So I didn't really get into writing until, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, when a buddy of mine who I talk about in the book, Alex, inspired me to start writing blogs, which are a lot easier than like writing a book, right, in your mind. And so a couple years ago, I got asked to lead a group at church, like a large group that we had at the church campus, on biblical like approach to entrepreneurship. And I wrote a teaching called Taming the Lion. And I wanted to take this teaching and write a book about it. So I've worked on that for about a year, like on and off. And I guess you could say I got writer's block. And I'll be honest, I really just didn't have the confidence to finish a book because I thought, like, who am I to write a book?
Yep.
And so I kept blogging. And then about a year and a half ago, I wrote a blog called 6 Ways to Never Stop Growing. And I taught it in person at a couple organizations. I did it as like a public speaking opportunity a couple times. And it was like 10,000 words, way too long to be a blog on my website. My normal blogs are like 1,000. And so I thought, I left a lot out, and I could finish this up and probably write it in about 20,000 words, which is about 100 pages. And I thought maybe this could be my first book. And then I could get, my training wheels out underneath me and learn what the publishing process is like. So like December of 2019, I committed to finishing it. And then probably March or April of last year, I finished the manuscript and then pursued a publishing agency, worked a deal out with Scribe. And then, they went through like 3 revisions and then here we are.
Yeah.
Yes,
That's awesome,
go,
man. Congrats. And I think there's a very important lesson in your story. There's multiple lessons, of course, but the one that stood out to me right now was the fact that you said, I didn't believe myself to be like very competent at first, competent writer, right? But that didn't stop you, right? That didn't stop you from taking action and, relating it to the content world and what we do and what the audience, right, listening here is for. Sometimes we're so afraid to step in front of the camera and share our message because we have the same doubt of who am I to actually be talking about this topic when there might be someone out there that might be better suited to talk about it, right? And guess what? It's okay. It's even better. You need to put yourself out there in those uncomfortable situations because that's the only way to grow, right? So I'm curious, going a little bit farther back on Jared, right? Like, how did you get started on the world of personal growth? Because did somebody in your family was an entrepreneur? How did you came up into this world? Because like we said at the beginning, personal growth for us is directly tied to entrepreneurship, right? If you want to grow a business, like there's no other way. You got to grow personally as well.
I agree. So no, to answer your question, nobody in my family was entrepreneurial. So like I was raised by a single dad and, we struggled to get by as a small family. It was me and my brother and my dad for the majority of my upbringing. And so very early on, I knew the value of money because I knew that we didn't have it, right? And so like we were the poor kids in the poor neighborhood where kids even had a pair of Nikes. We were drawing it on our Payless shoes kind of thing, So at an early age, I was really ambitious, not to have like grandeur and to be like a well-known person, but just really to fit in. So I became a hustler like early on. And I guess I was innately entrepreneurial. I think being an entrepreneur is something that can grow on you given the circumstance later in life. Like you can become an entrepreneur at 50 or you can be born with it. I don't think it necessarily matters which one you are. And I don't think that indicates whether or not you'll be good or bad. But mine was just early because it was a need that I had to fit in and then ultimately to kind of afford to keep up with my friends, to be able to do stuff on the weekends. I need a little bit of cash. And so I remember really like my first hustle was in elementary school, I would draw kids because I was really good at drawing and they would pay me for these portraits. And these were relatively good portraits for a 9-10-year-old to do. Yeah. So I did that for money as a kid. That wasn't something that was consistent that I could count on. So at like 11, in 6th grade, which I was a skateboarder and I was pretty good. And me and these 2 kids would skateboard to school. And I remember like early on in 6th grade, they were twins and they were not afraid of anything. They would go into the store and steal like a bag of lollipops and then I would sell it at school. And we'd turn this free bag of lollipops into $30. I'd share the money with them. And then eventually I stopped doing that with them because I didn't need to steal. And because I didn't like to steal and they were good at it. So eventually I just used my cash to buy the lollipops to bring to school, to sell to school. And eventually I got in trouble for that because you can't really leverage break time for capitalism in 6th and 7th grade. But I also started smoking pot in 6th grade. And so very quickly, because I could see how the exchange works, like arbitrage in general, I recognized that I could buy $20 worth and I could sell $20 worth and then still have some left over for myself. And I began to do that until it was $50 and $100. And then I realized I could make money, keep some and sell it. And so I started doing that at 11. And I continued to do that until I was 17. And eventually, like most people that break the law and sell drugs, I got caught. And so the end of my senior year, I got caught. I got charged as an adult. And I spent the summer after my senior year in jail. And so that's kind of how that transpired. But yeah, that's my early entrepreneurial journey. And that's kind of, what brought me ultimately here, I guess you could say.
Wow, man! Thank you for opening up and sharing that story. I personally didn't know that side of your story, man. And like I feel like we've talked about it before here in the podcast, how a lot of entrepreneurship is born from need, right? It's either need, and some people start by greed sometimes, and during the journey it might change, right? Like that shift, that goal that people have, right? Now you want to impact others and help them grow, right? Obviously, the goal has changed massively, but I can't even imagine what it would be to spend your last summer after school in jail, right? And what that did to you, probably at a psychological level, like thinking
Yeah.
about your own life, your own
Yeah.
decisions, and moving forward past that.
Yeah, I will, Jared. Well, again, thank you for sharing that story. It's not often where we see like real honest, stories out here, especially at that level. And I want to highlight something at the content and story type of deal, because most people that are starting their publishing journeys, right, might be really scared to share stories like that, for example, right? Like, we come from Venezuela. We've shared a couple of those stories. I personally, we were never really involved in activities like that just because of the environment that we grew up in. But we had other stories like being kidnapped, for example. Like, that's one of the ones, right, that it might not be easy to kind of start sharing, because we don't understand really the value that could potentially bring to people that might follow us. So I appreciate you sharing that story, and I want everybody listening to take note. To, again, we tend not to share the wounds. We share the scars, right? So I'm sure there's a process with you that you went through, and you grew and you evolved, and now you are very confident that with that story you can inspire so many others that are coming after you. So I just wanted to say thank you for sharing that piece of information.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I want to dive in a little bit into the book, right? I have a little notes that I took in here. It did make me reflect. I love the fact that you have like worksheets in there after every chapter is sit down and do the work. I love that, because self growth, it is a lot of it is looking at yourself and being honest with yourself and spending the time with yourself to grow. So my first question for you, in regards to the book, is when did you discover that you needed to spend time with yourself, and when did you gain that level of awareness, right, that made you transition to I need to work more on me personally?
I guess I'm kind of lucky. I mean, I remember getting like a diary maybe for Christmas or something when I was probably 10. And so I wrote in my diary or my journal, whatever you want to call it, often as a kid. And what I was writing about then is my struggles, the girls that I'm thinking about, and want to get better at kick flips or something, very basic stuff. But from an early on, I didn't know that I was working on self-awareness and stuff, but I was just writing about my day-to-day. And I had done that for a long time. And it's something that faded away into high school, because high school wasn't about self-awareness. It was really more about fitting in and getting girls to like you and just getting to college. So really, one of the most pivotal experiences in my life that made me pursue self-growth was going to jail. Because I was so selfish in high school. I had a chip on my shoulder because I was the poor kid, and like, why do I have to be poor? And all of my friends are rich, and da 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 da. And because of that, I had these ambitions that got me in trouble. And so when I got in jail, I got a real dose of reality, because jail is not like the movies. And just to clarify, I wasn't in prison. County jail is different than prison. I would argue that it's worse, but that's because you're not supposed to be there for a long time. So, we ate about 1,000 calories a day. You ate at 4 a.m., 1 p.m., and 5 p.m. You're underneath yellow lights 23 hours out of the day. Even when you go to sleep, all they do is dim the lights. Like, it's miserable.
Wow.
You're just in this block 24 hours a day. And if you get in trouble, you're locked down in your room, and it is absolutely miserable. And so the freedoms that I took for granted prior to that, I realized that I was in jail. It was a big wake-up call. So I not only realized how much I actually had prior, but I found God in jail. And going into jail, I was an atheist. And when I say I was an atheist, I wasn't like a smart one. I couldn't argue with a Christian, about the existence of a creator. I just chose not to believe for myself because I had this chip on my shoulder.
Yeah.
And it's a whole nother story, but through, really a divine encounter, I came to know God and to know Jesus in county jail. But in addition to that, I had also gotten into fitness prior to going to jail because I had to quit smoking weed right before. And so I didn't know what else to do with my time, but I got invited to the gym and I started going. And the gym is really what introduced me to continual self-growth, because you go on Monday and you do chest and then you do back on Tuesday. And so it was this really like measurable, consistent form of getting better every day. It was like, all right, well, my bench press is 100 pounds today. I want to be 110 by next month, 120. And then it was 150 and 170. And so exercising and just, I want to look this way. I want to have abs. I want to have this size back, arms. It was this measurable increase. And so when I went to jail, somebody inspired me to become a trainer, which they basically were just like, when you get out of here, you should be a personal trainer. And I had no idea what that was.
Yeah.
And so I got out of jail. Obviously, I was a Christian at this time too. So the idea of trying to be a better human along the way was like central. But now I'm interested in the fitness industry and I'm on house arrest. So when I got out of jail, I was on house arrest for 2 years. And I wouldn't have called it a self-growth journey, but it was a journey of getting back on my feet and ahead of the curve. And so I was working full time. I was going to college full time. I was studying to be a personal trainer, and I was exercising 5 days a week, like in my backyard, in my shed, because I couldn't leave my house. And so it was like I had all these markers. I want to be more fit. I want to get my education. I want to make enough money to survive because I have all these debts now because of court fees and lawyer costs and stuff. So it wasn't necessarily these were goals that I set. These were things that I absolutely had to do. And so 2 years goes by and I finish all this stuff. And then I have just this way that I think, this way that I live, this way that I manage my money. And then I started pursuing, obviously in the fitness industry, it was sales manager, general manager, area manager. Money-wise, it was X amount, X amount, X amount. And so that just became a part of my life because it was such an ingrained habit from when I got out of jail.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
That's interesting. Like, I wrote a couple of things here, right? Like measurable process, finding your markers, right? Those are two things that you mentioned in there that in the life of an entrepreneur, maybe there's somebody that wants to, kind of move forward in anything that they do in life. And in the interview that we had earlier today with Andrea, we kind of talked about this, right? The containers and how can we execute on that and then reflect on what happens. And Fonzie often mentions the ideal process of creating something, right? Like either a piece of content idea, a process, right? And is reflecting on that and then going back to the prototype and then execute and then going back at it, right? So what I see and what I kind of distill from the story that you just told is that you created those markers based off the situation that you had at the time with certain goals, right? And you were like consistently measuring it, right? And I think a lot of people, because I don't know if it's the distractions that happen all around us, that process never happens. Like you were put in an environment where you had to, these are your, 3 things that you could potentially keep an eye on because there's no other distractions outside. So you got extremely focused, right? So with that in mind, how can people today, right? Like with everything happening around either life in general, the business, the family, different things around that could potentially deviate us a little bit from staying focused. How can people stay focused today while they find their markers and start to measure this progress?
I think one of the most practical ways to stay focused is to journal every day. And people count this out because it's too easy. It's like, that's too easy. I need a harder task to stay focused. And it's like, no. Journaling for 5 to 10 minutes every day and reflecting on how yesterday went and on what you want to get done today and who you are, maybe reading through what your personal values are, what's your goal today, what's your long-term goal. Just reading those things on a regular basis keeps you grounded because the most important thing is staying focused on yourself. I think the reason why I had we can call it success early on. I don't know if you can call house arrest success, but like when I was getting out of jail on house arrest, working 2 jobs, going to school, studying to be a trainer, I was laser focused on digging myself out of a hole.
Yeah.
My back was against the wall because if I didn't pay these fines, then I go back to jail. And if I don't go to school, then I won't have a career. And I'm during that period of time, I was a convicted felon. Now, when I get off, Now I'm not, I got all that stuff expunged, but my back was against the wall. I was literally counted out. So we live in a world now where we're constantly comparing ourselves to other people. No matter what social media platform you're on, you're going to get discouraged because your best day is nothing compared to somebody else's on social medias, because that's all you're seeing. And so back then, yes, there was still Facebook back then, and I think maybe MySpace. But I didn't have time to compare myself, and nobody was comparing themselves to me. So like I only had up. And so that was fortunate for me, but a lot of people hopefully aren't in that situation. And so the only way to really work on growing yourself personally every single day is by focusing on yourself. And I think the best way to do that is by just like grounding yourself in self-awareness through the easy, consistent process of journaling. That's it for me. I mean, that's the most simple approach to it.
That's awesome. That's a great advice. And I know you in the book, you talk a lot about journaling too. You mentioned it a few times. I can see why, right? I mean, when I see your profile, your Instagram, right? When I see you are focused, doing your thing. I think the few times I've seen you at the coffee shop, right, at night, you are sitting down doing some of your work. And I asked you, I was like, oh, do you come here often? And you're like, yeah, this is my place to disconnect and focus on me, right? And I was like, well, that is really cool that you have even your own environment. And just so you know, I think we might start using that house arrest success term. So when people are extremely focused, we're gonna be like, house arrest success.
I love it.
Don't worry, we're gonna give you attribute and everything for that. Yeah. And something that resonated with me a little bit farther back in your story was the fact that you said you had a chip on your shoulder, right? The fact that you were kind of blaming others, where it's like, oh, I'm poor, they got money, like they have the opportunities. There's clearly a shift in there of locus of control, right? And for those that are not familiar with what locus of control is when pretty much you own 100% of responsibility. That's when you have an internal locus of control, that you believe that you can actually make a change and that you're responsible for what happens to you. And when you have an external locus of control, when you're putting blames in other people, right? And we don't actually own our reality. So, I mean, clearly now you're a person with internal locus of control. And I feel this is a trait that you find in people that are invested in their own personal growth. This is something that you see. How can somebody that find themselves blaming others for what's happening in their life, how can they work on themselves? The answer might be journaling, to start, to switch that perspective on, instead of blaming others, asking themselves, okay, why am I in this situation? What did I do to put myself here? And how can I move forward?
Yeah, well, having a strong internal locus of control is super important. And there are external factors that, can affect our lives today or our lives in 10 years. They can certainly get in the way of our goals. But you can't really harbor on external factors because you don't have any control over them. Yeah. And so my thing would be by setting big, audacious goals. And so the reason for that is because if you get laser focused on a big, Jim Collins, he's an author, he would say big, hairy, audacious goal, BHAG. If you get laser focused on a BHAG, and then you reverse engineer that big, hairy, audacious goal into the steps that it takes to reach it, you don't really have time to focus on other people. And you'll see very quickly that if you continue to blame other people and other things and other circumstances on you not reaching your mile marker goals to get to that big thing, you'll never even get to the mile marker. And by experiencing that level of pain over and over and over again of saying, dang, I didn't reach my goal because of this person. Dang, I didn't reach my goal because of this other person. Eventually, hopefully, your eyes will be open to the fact that despite what other people do, it is your responsibility for creating the life that you want to live by reaching these particular goals, right? And so for some people, the goal might be a great parent. Now, if you don't take personal responsibility over the circumstances in your life and you blame other things on parenthood, you're going to have a very hard time because a lot of crazy stuff is happening every single day in the world.
Yep.
If your goal is to become a successful business mogul, same thing applies, right? Because there are circumstances in the marketplace, the economy changes, every single day. You have last year, for example, right? Everything changed last year. And so whether it's big business, whether it's being a good spouse or a good mom, you have to set these big goals and reverse engineer it. And then just realize that you are in total control of that. Now, of course, as Christians, we believe that God is in total control, but he also gives us free will. So that's this weird nuanced reality. But at the end of the day, you got to work hard to accomplish the things that you want to do. And the only way you're going to do that is by setting realistic goals.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love it.
Yeah, let me tell you, like we've interacted with you once or twice. Like I personally interacted with you, I think a couple of times. I don't go to the coffee shop like Fonzie does, but I'm pretty impressed and honored to also listen from people that have worked with you. And like, you know, and as a leader, like that's so important too, to have your crew, to have the people that you can count on to do the business, right? And in just this past year, the last 2 years have been like heavily invested in for us in coaching, in the guidance, in people that can really, you know, pull us up and holding hands to try things out and do the process. And hey, sometimes, you know, smack our face and be like, wake up and, you know, move forward. So what has been some of the after that stage, and what was your process on investing in coaching and investing in mentors? Was that a process for you? Like, how was that evolution to get to the point that you are now with very successful companies, you know, behind your back, and the book published, and all the success that you're having?
Do you mean like what's my process with people coaching and mentoring me?
Yeah, or have you yeah, what was your process through your entrepreneurial journey?
I think kind of like, have you find yourself in an environment where you are seeking for some sort of mentorship, right? That you bring into your life?
I would say that I'm always looking for mentorship. However, I haven't had the best luck in that area. And I don't know, you know, because what I do or what I've built, right? If we talk about like Superfit Foods, for example, being a fully customizable, subscription-based, e-commerce driven, healthy food company, there's nothing like that in existence. There's some other food companies out there, but they're based out of Jersey or California, and they're meal kits, and they're just different. And so I've never met somebody that I can call on to say, hey, I'm dealing with this circumstance. Can you offer me some advice? I'm a Christian, right? And so of course I look for leadership in that area, but there's not a lot of Christian guys that are this far along in business that are as fascinated about the fitness industry as I am. And so that's also been very difficult for me too. And I might just be on my soapbox, but I am always looking for different forms of leadership and mentorship. And I've gotten lucky. I have a couple guys in my world that are my close friends and stuff, but that doesn't mean I don't continue to pursue it. I just read a lot of books because I do know young people that wait for their mentor, right? And they're waiting for someone to pour into them and encourage them and educate them on the process. And I'm not a waiter. And so that it might be pride in me that's made it difficult for me to have a consistent coach or mentor or anything like that. But I am someone that's like, if I want to know something today, I'm Googling it, I'm buying the book, I'm reading the article, I'm staying up late, and I'm taking notes, I'm waking up early and I'm studying before work, after work. That's just how I am. Same thing with my Christian experience too. Like I just read the Bible, right? I don't just go to church. I'm reading the Bible every day.
Yeah.
So my mentorship has honestly came from literature, from even reading memoirs and biographies on, you know, Steve Jobs, Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk. Like I know everything about these people because I want them to be my mentors, and I certainly can't afford them. So that's what I do. That's the route I take.
Yes, dude, I love it because you said something there key, like you take action, right? Like and you know, we're foreign, we're from Venezuela, and we've heard many times that people that come in here into this country normally tend to be hard workers, right? Because, you know, maybe it's a perspective on there were countries or the situations that they've lived in. And, you know, with your story and your background, you lived through a very tough situation, right? When you were growing up, from your childhood to, you know, your adolescence to then the house arrest, and then all this framework in the back in your mind, you created this environment too, where it's like, I need to take action. I need to, you know, I don't take, you know, anything from anybody. This is my focus. This is my goal. Right. And that's very admirable. And there's some people out there that might need a little extra push out there, but the one thing that I take from that is like, there's no excuses, right? There's so much information out there that we can consume. And if we take action, things are going to happen. We're going to move forward. You're the proof of it. So, thank you for the reminder. I think, a reminder for us, a reminder for everybody listening too, that there's always a way, right? Like we have to believe that we can create that change, that positive change to go out and execute. And there's no excuse.
Yeah. This just opened up a little bit another question in my mind, right? Because what you're explaining, I love reading too, right? I love digging into books, especially if I want to learn like a new topic. I'm like, okay, let me grab the books about that topic and just dive into those. And I think that is a trait that especially entrepreneurs have, which is that intellectual curiosity, right? Is it, I don't want to wait. Let me just go and find out the information. How can people cultivate that, right? Because especially nowadays where we live in this world, this fast-paced information world, dopamine everywhere, right? Attention span of like 8 seconds. Intellectual curiosity, it does take time and effort to sit down and read through an entire book without your mind wandering in other places, right? And I know part of the answer might be you need to want it bad enough, right? Do you actually want what you're doing? But what do you think could be a way for people to start cultivating that intellectual curiosity?
Well, this is a practice that sometimes I have to do myself. And again, this comes back to, it would help to have a journal, but is sitting for a moment and thinking about what will my life look like in 5-10 years if I continue to do nothing about the things that I want to accomplish. And literally thinking about that. For example, I used to smoke cigarettes. Like I started at age 11. It kind of came with the weed smoking and skateboarding territory. And granted, this is 20 years ago too. So people, like everyone smoked cigarettes. And I smoked until I was 19. And that was when I wanted to pursue becoming a personal trainer. And I thought nobody's going to hire a trainer that smokes cigarettes. That was just my thought. That was an act. There was a bunch of trainers that smoked, but that was my thought. But I was addicted physically to smoking cigarettes. But I had to hate the idea of being an unemployed cigarette smoker more than the idea that I liked about being a personal trainer. Like I literally had to learn to hate what the future might look like if I don't quit this habit. Yeah. And I think not taking action is a bad habit. And so best way to start is just to imagine, what would my life look like in 5, 10, 20 years if I continue to not work towards my goals, and literally manifest that. And then you got to hate it. You got to hate it. What would my life look like if I continue to be broke? What would my life look like if I continue to skim by? What would my life look like if I continue to rely on everybody else to get by, my parents, my spouse, my friends, whatever? Or what would the latter look like? And so you got to learn to hate what the former might look like. And then taking action is really about baby steps. People get themselves so hung up on, and I know I said set big goals, but you have to reverse engineer it to the minute details of what does the first step look like to making $1 million? It's saving $5 this week. It's baby steps. It's compound interest on small actions, and that's what creates habits. And so again, that's where I would start in creating disciplines. Now, something I talk about with reading, because I think reading is like one of the major elements to self-growth, is start with a book that you know for sure you will like. And let's say you want to build a great big business, but you've tried to open up a business book and you couldn't do it. Don't try to do that. Not for now. Put that on the back burner. Read a freaking Harry Potter book if that's how you start. You know what I'm saying? Like, get in the habit of flipping open a hardcover, reading physical pages. Do that 2-3 times. Pick that business book back up and see how you do.
Yeah.
If you're not there yet, put it back away. Find another freaking Dr. Seuss book. Like, I don't care what it is, but you got to get in the habit of opening up a book and telling yourself, I do read books. I can read books. Because people always say, oh, I'm just not a book reader. No, you just don't like reading the books that I read. That doesn't make you not. Everyone's a book reader. Like, we've been literally writing and reading books since we could write and read. So since prehistoric times. So it's like maybe they were written on cave walls and stuff. But we've been doing this for a long time. And so start with a book you know you'll like, and then get your reps in. Just like exercise, right? You may not want to be a bodybuilder or a CrossFitter like me, but try running. You don't like it? Try riding a bike. You don't like it, go play volleyball with your friends. There's another way to get involved in exercise without having to be the next fit queen or bodybuilder, you know? So you gotta find your way.
Yeah.
I love that. And I wrote down here this framework that I heard from Jeff Bezos, which was when people would ask him a question about, do you want to do this? The first thing that he asked himself is, am I going to regret it when I'm 80 years old if I don't do it? Right. And if the answer is yes, he's like, okay, let's do it. If the answer is no, I'm not going to regret it, he's like, maybe I'm not going to put my attention in here. Yeah. And it comes back to, that painting that clear future on what you want to be. So I love that. I think that's a great technique. Definitely an exercise that I believe, maybe, and correct me if I'm wrong, that people can do while journaling too, right? Just put those ideas down and write them down. Definitely think it is going to help people move forward. And I love what you're talking about. And this is just to illustrate it for people, but the marginal gains, right? That compound interest of doing the small things, right, on a consistent basis, because it can happen the same exact thing if you do the wrong thing on a consistent basis. That compounding interest line is just going to go down instead of up. So, so important. Like, break down your goals, baby steps, and then take action consistently.
I love how you also express that removing the friction side of things, right? On our end with publishing, we share the story with the first time that we attempted to start the show about 2 years ago, right? Where we recorded 5 episodes and we had 2 different cameras and the lights, and we had to build the set before we even recorded. And that took like 45 minutes. And it was like so much friction, right? And then later we're like, screw this. We're just gonna go Facebook Live because is the baby step, right? Is before I can actually establish what am I gonna say on the show, how am I gonna talk to, what stories am I gonna tell. Like, we remove all the friction to publish, and that was the answer for us, right? Like a lot of people now that we're having a challenge, which is great. But then from there, it's like, okay, from this Facebook video, then what? And then we started adding these little pieces. So the process that you explained with the book, I can relate 100, 1,000%, because I'm that guy, right? Fonzie will devour books, right? To me, I have to listen to them because, for me, I will say, this is a story that's in my head. I'll say I'm a slow reader. That needs to change. So this conversation with you is helping me assimilate and understand that. But at the same time, I also found a solution for me that works because I got to walk the dogs. I have 2 huskies and they need exercise, right? So I listen to it, right? Or be with the baby and walk the baby while I listen to it, or drive to the office. So there's other ways to also consume information and then adapt that. I understand that, reading a book, maybe we have that, and we always have the physical copy. So whatever resonates, we always go back to that. And I love that process because it removes the friction from that massive goal and it pushes you through execution. And you're literally rewriting, your habits as you go through. So thank you for breaking it down all the way down there, because I think a lot of people just go and try to add as much friction as possible. Like, how can I have this high-end production show if we're talking to the Competence Profit universe, right? And then they don't realize how much friction, how much work it needs to be done to get there. But if we want to get there, we can start, a little bit slow and then continue to execute day in, day out.
100%.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure, Jared, you didn't wake up one day and you were like, I'm going to go to a CrossFit competition. And the next day you weren't there. You had to work yourself, one day in, day out.
Yeah, far from it. Yeah.
So, Jared, we're getting closer to the end of today's episode, but I have a question about, let me see if I can find the part in the book that talks about kind of like building confidence. And part of it is going through your ideas, like actually taking action, right? And it is, most people think that they know themselves pretty well. Oh, no, wait. Wow, I lost the part. But it pretty much talks about, I have an idea, but I don't follow through. And then your confidence goes down. And then you have another idea, you don't follow through, your confidence will go down. And you said action breeds confidence. I think that was the phrase that you used in the book. And, when I read that, I saw myself identified in that part of the book, right? Because I definitely identify myself as an idea guy, mainly. Like, I'm always like dream fancy land, just dreaming, right, about the possibilities and like all these things I could do. For example, the most recent one is I got obsessed with tennis. I'm like learning how to play tennis. So I bought a racket. I've been going to play and stuff like that. But then after the hype is down, sometimes I'm like, okay, let me move into the next thing. And maybe I don't master it, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes I get to a place where I'm confident enough and I'm happy with where I got. But a lot of the times I don't follow through enough. And I'm like, oh, I just know the very basics. And then I move on to the next thing. So I saw myself identify there in that part a lot, right? I would personally like to follow through more of the ideas that I get. So what would be some of the maybe recommendations that you have, or what is something that you experience in your life that, you know, led you to build that confidence on following through with all these ideas that you had?
So this is one of the biggest things that helps me because people don't see all the tries, like for example, I hurt my back yesterday at the gym. I won't be able to work out for probably a week, right? And so like I won't be posting about that. So when people watch my videos of working out, they're like, oh, this guy's just always this strong or this fast. And it's like, no, I'm actually sometimes pretty bad. Therefore, my back hurts. Therefore, I need to take a break. That was a failed try for me. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so like Thomas Edison had over 7,000 tries before he came up with the light bulb, right? And it's like, if some of the greatest people in the world only tried at a few things, we wouldn't have electricity, we wouldn't have the iPhone, we wouldn't have the internet, we wouldn't have food delivery to your home, right? We would still be in prehistoric times on horses, walking miles to work manual labor jobs. So it's like, I actually reflect on past failures of either other people or myself in order to encourage me to keep trying at things that I know are difficult. For example, hurting my back. Like CrossFit is something that I want to take a nice college try at. And to be a competitive CrossFit athlete is a huge thing. I mean, it's a global sport and anybody can play, right? So the idea of being a competitive CrossFit athlete is like slim to none. I'm 31, like I'm a little older than some of these guys. So hurting my back is easy for me to be like, you know what, I'm done trying to be a competitive CrossFit athlete. I have 5 herniated discs. But then I remember Matt Frazier got a fused spine. He's the 5-time champion of the CrossFit Games, right? And then I think about other CrossFit athletes that have herniated discs. And I spend some time literally Googling it. And I'm like, holy crap, this is really encouraging. These guys, broken ankle, surgery on his shoulder. This thing happened when he was a kid. And he's crushing it, right? And so it's like, if they can do it, why can't I?
Yeah.
So that really helps me. And then reflecting on my own journey of being like, I was 95 pounds when I got in high school. I graduated at 135. Went on to be a competitive bodybuilder and got, some pretty big awards there. And so it's like, I did those things. I can do this thing.
Yeah.
So those really help me. And I know that's not like measurable. It's not as quantitative as a lot of my normal advice, but it encourages me, man, to know that there are a ton of other normal human beings out there accomplishing some great feats.
Yeah.
And still have a lot of failed tries along the way.
Yeah. I think you just said that it might not be measurable, but I think it is, because, you'll be like, okay, this is my idea. My process is I can find 1 or 2 people that, that are there. What happens, right? So I research, okay, well, I found 2. Perfect. Check, right? And then I reflect on my journey, right? And it's like, okay, what has taken me to get to this point? Check, right? And it's like, okay, I move forward, right? Yeah. So, we've always talking about these frameworks. So I think that's good, right? Because at the end of the day, it's like, what makes you take action? So I think this is pretty incredible. Like the fact that you've designed a framework around that decision making to come through an idea. You can run any idea coming through and be like, okay, what happened? Am I actually willing to do this, right? To get to that point, right? For you, yes, right? The other day, I think maybe like a few months ago, we come from soccer. So that's why we're here in the States, because we got soccer scholarships, right? And one of the frustrated dreams that we had was we didn't make it to a professional soccer. We were very close. Fonzie was actually pro here in Jacksonville with the Armada. But it was like, we see soccer and we're like, we still imagine, hey, how crazy would it be? Let's, get our preseason done and let's go submit our videos to Macedonia or like crazy countries, would still play professional, right? And but now reflecting on your process is like, okay, these guys went through that. I've come through here. Am I actually willing to do that? Like, for example, for me, I have a 2-year-old. So that would be pretty challenging, right? First off, to go to Macedonia and play professional with a 2-year-old. And my wife is probably going to be like, heck no, Luis. Yeah, don't. You're not allowed to do that, right? So then my process goes cut off. But at least you have that framework to go through and be like, okay, that's feasible, right? Am I willing to go and take action? So I loved it that it's highlighted here in the notes to make sure that we can revisit this every time.
I got something different from what you just shared, Jared, and it was that we, as I would dare to say, most people tend to go to the negative thought at first, right? They by default we tend to see the things that we're doing wrong, maybe the things that we are not following through with, instead of let's reflect on our wins, right? Let's build momentum by looking back and say, oh, wow, maybe I'm having a hard time right now, but guess what? I've done X, Y, and Z to get here, right? And I think, again, going back to the journaling, that might be a huge part of it, is reflecting and having on paper pretty much documenting your little wins day in and day out and your challenges. So when you go back and see it, you actually realize that you've been doing pretty good. And since you were talking about Jim Collins, right? I was actually listening to a podcast with him and Brené Brown, and he was talking that he measures his days from -2 to 2 on whether he was productive, whether he had a good day or not, right? Every single day. I don't remember the timeline that he has done it for, but it was a very long timeline. So when he feels like he's down one of these days, that he had a losing day, and I'm doing air quotes in here, instead of just getting on that mindset of beating yourself up, he goes back to the document and look at all the days that he has won, all the days that he scored perfect twos, and then he goes, wow, I'm actually in momentum here. I've actually done pretty well. Am I gonna let one day, one little action take all this down, right? So it is pretty impressive. I definitely, for those listening, it's an invitation to be more aware on that, right? When you find yourself in that negative mindset, is have I actually, done the work before? Do I have wins to celebrate? And just an invitation to reflect on that.
Yeah, I love it.
Dude, Jared, 2 last questions to wrap up the show. It has been incredible. Time has flown by. I'm like, holy moly, already done? Okay, so one is, what is a good action point? And I'm going to take a stab here on journaling, probably, that people can take to kind of start creating that momentum, right? And if it's journaling, let's develop a little bit more on that, like more specifics on how can we take action. And if something else that you want to mention, go ahead.
Well, yeah, I didn't want this to be a journaling podcast, but I would say go buy a journal. That's the first action. Yes. Go spend your money on a $10, $15, $20 journal on Amazon.
Question, Jared. I think don't you have your own journal?
I do. Yeah. So I have the self-help journal. It's on Amazon or Etsy. You don't need mine. Mine is guided. So it's definitely going to have some prompting questions for you. And the book prompts you to answer some of the questions that are in my journal. But if, you don't have to go buy mine, you can buy a blank memo pad, whatever it is that you can sit down with a pen or a pencil and begin to write things down. And the second thing is set some goals for this year. They have to be specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-based, but set some goals this year, because that's how you're going to measure growth.
Yes. Incredible.
Awesome.
Easy peasy. I think there cannot be any friction. Like, there's no friction whatsoever on doing this. By the way, we're going to put the link on the journal right here in the description. All you got to do is scroll down and click there. And then last question, Jared, I know that you published, obviously you publish, but you also have a show. You're all over the place. Where would you be if you did not publish?
What do you mean?
Like, where would you be if you didn't put your thoughts into words, if you didn't write the book, if you wouldn't created the podcast to interview and connect with other people? Where would you be?
I wouldn't be on this show. Like, what would I be doing if I wasn't
Yeah, where would you be in your life? Do you think it has, in a way, affected the transition of your life?
Yeah. So the self-help book is really just a documentation on how I personally grow in my confidence, my competence, my character, my clarity, my connections, and my commitment, right? So, it's always been said the best way to learn is to teach. And I'm a teacher at heart. So writing the book for me propelled me to a new level of self-growth, because now I have to be far more integral with how I carry myself, because I wrote a book about it, right?
Yes.
And so over the past year, I've seen, I would say, significant milestones in my growth journey just from documenting the process on how I go about doing what I do.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And now I'm going to turn that into an invitation for those that are listening to document, right, like what you're doing and your values and your growth. Because in a way, I feel like it's accountability. It turns into accountability too with the people that are watching. And like you said, an integral part of your life now, because you have to live up to what you're putting out into the world. So thank you so much. And again, I want to invite people to go and get the book, the self-help book by Jared Graybeal, and read it, fill in the prompts inside of the book, and connect with Jared. Jared, where can they connect with you?
I'm most active on Instagram. So Jared Axel Graybeal, AXL, from the lead singer of Guns N' Roses. Or you can check out my website, jaredgraybeal.com.
Awesome. And if they want to find the book, where can they buy the book?
Amazon's going to be your best bet. It's sold anywhere online that books are sold, but Amazon for sure.
Awesome, man. Dude,
Yeah.
Thank you so much. We had a blast. I honestly, again, like my brother said, we've met you before in coffee shops and had small conversations, but I personally loved going deeper today. I think it was great.
Likewise, man. I appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Awesome, man.
Awesome.
Thank you. And with that, guys, thank you so much for tuning into the Competence Profit Podcast. Go ahead and subscribe. Smash that subscribe button and follow us on social media at BizBrosCo.
That is right. And if you find this episode impactful and you believe in what Jared talked about today and you want to keep growing, please don't forget to share it and leave a 5-star review. Thank you.
Bye, guys.